Yeah, so I actually had work this weekend in the production world. For background, I live in Los Angeles and I've been working on sets for past 3 years now, but it significantly has slowed down if anybody keeps up with that stuff. It's very slow. And so I actually worked my first red carpet premiere this weekend for the movie Thunderbolts. Um, it was so interesting because these premieres in LA take place on Hollywood Boulevard, and like you shut down a block, or it kind of equals out to like almost 2 or 3 blocks worth of road, but you're on the hard. If you've ever been on Hollywood Boulevard, I was standing in front of the Hard Rock Cafe, the Chinese Theater, the Dolby Theater where the Oscars take place, and so yeah, you're just walking that the whole day, and I was there for 2 days. Uh, but man, like the 2 days straight on Hollywood Boulevard is a very interesting place because again, if you've been there, you know there's people who just buy superhero costumes or will cosplay and then they will try and scam you into money. But like they're not good costumes at all. Like they're a step above a Halloween costume, but they're not really they're anything they don't they don't help the person wearing it, especially if that person's not fit. So yeah, seeing Spider-Man walk around and you're like, okay, clearly this is a retired version of Spider-Man. Like he's got nothing going on. But my funniest encounter with one of those guys was I was walking past Mickey Mouse and he was I don't even say walking, he was like strutting around and he was just making the loop around Hollywood Boulevard and I had to walk by him and he just looks at me and goes, "Sup, bro?" I just started laughing. So it's not even in character. But the one of the most interesting things I saw just on the Hollywood Boulevard part of it all was for again I was there for 2 days and both days this I'm just gonna say Korean girl I couldn't quite tell but she set up a live stream in front of a shop and it wasn't for the shop or anything. I shouldn't think she was on her own, but she was just standing on the Walk of Fame and set up her streaming setup and just for at least 4 to 5 hours nonstop advertised shoes. She she was holding the shoe. I'm assuming talking about the shoe in a very like high pitched voice like this the whole time, like this, like this. And it was like, oh my gosh, for like 5 hours. And she had a guy holding up three other shoes behind her. It was insane. I was annoyed at first because it's all I could hear. And then after hour three on the first day, I was like, you know what? This is some stamina that I've never seen
Respect the
before.
hustle.
Yeah. I was like, you know, I told my wife when I came, I was like, I kind of want to go find and buy some shoes now from her because I see how hard she works. But other than that, the premiere is quite an interesting experience. First time on a red carpet or even like being around that environment, and it's an odd side of like I've seen the working side of a production, obviously working on sets. Um, but then you get to the red carpet side, and it's just as interesting in the way of like they brought in it being a Marvel thing. They brought in a bunch of people playing in cosplay for the heroes. Some of them were quite impressive. You know, I saw one guy, he like full on 3D printed his suit, his helmets, his shield. Um, and then there was one kid who literally to look like Bucky, um, had tinfoil just wrapped around his arm. And I was like, you know what? Respect the hustle. He got in. Uh, but yeah, and then sorry, my dog is moving around underneath me if you hear that. Um, but yeah, then yeah, I got to stand right by the stage and see all the stars come up and do interviews. Like Florence Pugh was near me at one point. But yeah, it was really cool to see all that. But yeah, just being on Hollywood is just it's a very chaotic and it's hard to explain kind of experience. So yeah. But yeah, next
Sounds
week
like
Blake's
it.
gonna do the intro.
I'll do it
I,
after Texas.
yeah, there we go. I was planning on trying to get Blake to do the intro this week, but yeah, then I had 2 days full of experiences to talk about. But that being said, let's get into this really fun weekend.
Yeah, let's go.
All right, Talladega. Um, we have a lot to talk about, obviously.
So much.
Yeah, it was action packed, both races. But Blake, let's hear your perspective from the Xfinity race.
Yeah, so for the Xfinity race for us, we qualified well. We started 10th, but then something with the car after the qualifying run to then like race trim. We didn't have any practice. I didn't know this until this past weekend, but and since COVID, some of these teams don't get practice at Talladega, Daytona, or maybe it's only certain races. I'm not sure that they just show up to the track, they qualify after going through tech, and then they impound them and go race. That's all they do. And so when we got on the track, Jeremy was saying that the car was really darty. And if you're watching the YouTube video of us do the podcast right now, Darty, like if he was just driving and holding onto the wheel, if he let go, the car just wanted to jerk one way or the other. And so I guess we were trying to kind of self-diagnose that during the race, make some calls or get some stuff ready for when we pitted to see if we can open the hood and check out what's going on with it. So we had that issue, and we really never really shook that off from the start of the race to the end. Like he wasn't able to draft properly. He wasn't able to get in line and push anyone. He said it just felt something was
Yeah,
off. So I don't know what happened. We never found out. But that's kind of how our day went. We were kind of we definitely had speed. Just something with the balance was messed up, and or the setup, something with the toe, and it was not performing to Jeremy's liking. So we were kind of in a situation all day that if we were to finish well, it's probably because of a big wreck towards the end, and we avoided it
yeah.
because we never really even tried to go to the front. We kind of stayed mid pack most of the race and just buy our time. So all that being said, it kind of was a bummer we couldn't run up front, but at the same time, that's super speedway racing. Some races are crazy and have insane wrecks, and some of them are kind of minimal, like this past weekend.
Yeah, I thought y'all were just sandbagging. And
I
yeah, because
wish.
well, yeah, I mean, kind of jump into the cup race. I saw Denny fall back a little bit, and I know a lot of drivers will do that either now to save gas or to try to avoid those big wrecks. Like some drivers like to be in the back, and some like to be in the front. Uh, it's a bit different, I'm assuming, with the next gen now. But getting into the Xfinity race, ultimately, Austin Hill will go on to win. I do want to do a scheme shout out. Maybe we might work this in as a weekly thing, but I really enjoyed the Ollie scheme on Creed's car. Um, that was pretty cool. So
I
just
pitted
want.
the I pitted the Ollie's car last year with Blaine Perkins.
Oh yeah, and didn't that one wreck? Wasn't it? Or was
A
that
few
years
years
ago?
ago,
Yeah,
like 2022 or something like that,
I think I saw a
23,
highlight of that
he had a
recently.
really bad wreck. He went to the University of Alabama at Birmingham because they ended up sponsoring him for one of the races last year as well.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
that's where
okay.
he was taken to after that bad flip in Dega. I don't
Oh,
remember what
that's
year it was. I can't remember if it was 22 or 23, but he had the bad
yeah,
accident, and so they ended up sponsoring him, which I guess that's a crazy way to find a sponsor. Your
yeah.
wreck ended up in their medical
Network from
center,
the
and like,
hospital bed.
hey, you want to sponsor a race car, even though you're like
Yeah.
laid up in a hospital
It
bed?
may just be the anesthesia, but I think you should put your name on my car.
Do you guys want to sponsor the hood?
Yeah.
Could you
Um,
imagine that? You walk in the room and your patient's like, "Do you want to sponsor my race car?"
yeah.
Like, that's
Before you
awesome.
go, before we start this
Before
surgery.
I pay this bill, do you want to come to the
Yeah,
racetrack with me?
I know how we can work a deal out here. This bill's outrageous, and it just so
Yeah,
happens to be the
seriously.
same amount as it would be to sponsor my car.
Trade.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw something this weekend talking about a like a sponsor like Kroger or Menards because they always have they'll be like Menards, but then for instance Austin Cindric having a whatever the brand was Quaker on his car, and I didn't really think about it because I kind of just knew that they could there was a loophole and they could sponsor these bigger names through this loophole of just being Kroger or whatever, but it made sense after someone explained like someone asked about Brandon Jones having Menards and then Brandon Jones' father being CEO of Ream, I think, and then Menards and them just work out a deal saying, well, we'll put you on the hood and we'll also push your product more in our advertisings or whatever. And I was like, oh, that makes complete sense now why these kind of because it's also like I remember somebody was pointing out like, sorry, Lucy, what are you doing? Lay down. Lay down. Lay down.
I'm gonna talk to my imaginary dog down here. Hey, girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, Owen.
Lucy, what do you need? Go, go. He just like stood up and stared at me. Um,
I
leave
guess
it.
redo.
So yeah, I believe is it Brandon Jones' father is the CEO of Ream, and yeah, I assumed that there's that loophole, but then somebody explained like they'll work out a deal with like Ryan Priest having Celsius, but also Kroger, and Kroger goes to Celsius, and they work out a deal saying like, we'll push your product more to be able to put you on the car. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. It makes more sense still. Kroger kind of they need to they need to figure something out with their paint schemes because it's like they'll have a really cool side profile on the car, but then just the hood just stays white. And every
Yeah,
time
for
I see
everybody
it,
listening that doesn't know, Owen has this like animosity towards Kroger and their hoods because they really mess up paint schemes, and it's just I
they,
think Owen's
I think we
OCD
can all
kicks in.
agree.
It kicks in, and Kroger just out there effing up some paint schemes, and Owen's just like
Gosh,
losing his mind
I
out
know
in
I'm not the only
California.
one. Yeah,
I
we
don't know
have
if I should be
Ralphs out
saying
here.
that, but
Well, I mean,
whatever. We're
to,
just gonna say it.
if they ever hear this to make them happy, I still shop at Ralph's at times. So it hasn't stopped me from that to that point, but it's it's still just like just work with what was the butter brand they put on the side, and it was just all brown and then the white hood. It's just like work with the brand, maybe get
Are you talking
creative
about
with
like
the
bushes, like the baked beans?
no. Priest, I think at Darlington ran the butter crocker or something. I'm not gonna.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it
Yeah,
was like
we're not brand ambassadors. We don't know what we're
no, we're
talking
not.
about.
But anyways, uh, yeah, getting off topic, but getting back to the Xfinity race. Love got the pole. But a couple people that qualified pretty well was Joey Gase, in second, and then Ryan Ellis getting ninth, which was pretty good qualifying in their ends. And y'all got 10th, which was also another good qualifying on y'all's effort. Kind of cool to see some people up there, but a pretty quiet first stage. Jesse Love ultimately gets it, dude leads a lot of it. Um, and then
Was Austin Hill stage two winner?
yeah, Austin Hill won stage two, but during like stage two, I actually thought there was a lot of good racing with like the lead changing and everything. Like it was,
Hmm.
again, as this week was or this weekend was ultimately boring. I still thought that honestly, like the respectful, clean racing was an entertainment value, especially in the Xfinity race where they could pass easier. And so for them to be able to lead change and race and stuff without just wrecking all the time was actually it's becoming for me starting out as a chaotic fan and wanting to see that chaos and settling into knowing the strategy more and knowing the respect that can be brought in on the track and on the racing. Seeing that played out more in stage two, especially was kind of it kept me interested the whole time. I'll say that. But as you said,
Nice.
Austin Hill ultimately finishes or takes stage two. And ultimately, the weekend, I'm just now realizing, is just swept by RCR, which is not a surprise at these kind of tracks. But yeah, and then in stage three, we have kind of our first big wreck with the 39, 35, 8, and 27 all wreck with about 36 to go. Kind of a wreck y'all are hoping for, but not as big as y'all may have wanted.
Yeah, like I was kind of saying earlier, I don't know if we were really hoping for people to wreck, but definitely that was going to be the only way we had a great finish is if we had something happen in front of us.
Yeah, that wreck was caused by kind of I think that was, no, I don't think that was the 19. I think that's the next wreck with 13 to go, where the 19 wasn't clear, goes up, and then ultimately just wrecks
Yeah,
himself,
Catherine
the
Legg.
20, Catherine Leg, and then the 24 as well, all just get spun out. That was another big
Mm,
one that, again, not the size y'all needed, but it, I'm sure it did help with some positions.
for
Um,
sure. I think we
but
ended up finishing 19th, so it really wasn't all that bad of a day.
no, that's definitely not a horrible day, especially with having issues. Um, but yeah, that was an interesting wreck because like, again, you have the a veteran driver in the 19 and just not a clear. He was kind of upset with his sponsor in a respectful frustration. He came over the radio. He was like, "What was that?" He was like, "You were
Dang.
clear, I promised."
Yeah, I mean, I think when he made the initial move, he was clear. I
Yeah.
would have to say that some of maybe Catherine's inexperience on a restrictor plate track or a super speedway, I should say, probably played
Yeah.
into an effect. But when he made the move, she closed the gap pretty quick, and then there was no recovering once he had
And
made the decision.
I've seen it like twice now. And to me, it just seemed like a miscommunication. It's just kind of, I couldn't blame it on leg or the 19 necessarily. Like it just seemed like a racing misfortune, a misfortunate event. Going to the final lap now, this was the wreck that made me like hurt on the inside was watching Connor Zilic get
Yeah, he
spun.
hit hard.
Gosh. I mean, him and we're going to
I
talk about Bells in a minute, but like
I
both of those
was
hits just hurt
I
me.
will say that watching that hit, I was hurting just seeing it, and when they threw the yellow flag, I thought that was probably overall the best decision. Even though they could have probably raced to the line, it's still the idea that like safety personnel can't get on the track until caution's out. So
Yeah.
getting to him was the most important thing, and he hit hard. So it
Yeah.
was the right thing to do to go ahead and throw the yellow, regardless of what you think they should have raced back to the line or not. I think that getting to Connor was the most important part.
That's the thing my wife was asking about, um, kind of like trying to finish the race under green on this final lap. She was like, "Oh, they could totally slow down by the time they get to him." It's like,
Yeah,
yes, but at the same time, like you just when someone is potentially hurt, you maybe not know everything at the moment, but you just don't want a sitting duck, even if they are off the track. And yeah, it is one of those a bad enough wreck where they can't keep going and potentially they could be hurt. You don't want to put the product over safety in that situation.
yeah, for sure. Don't
But
compromise that.
it does it did lead to a three wide finish under the caution.
Yeah,
I was hoping Jeb got it, uh, just because it would be cool to see him win. But unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but just Austin Hill ultimately comes out the winner. Was just ahead because the 27 had the momentum going
yeah,
into the caution. I actually did think he got it, but Austin Hill just had it right when the caution came out. It was funny to watch them all three like line up on the front stretch to like wait for the call. And as they're playing like the replay, like my wife and I were like, Jesse Love, you can just go on back.
you
Wasn't
can go to
like,
pit road, buddy.
yeah. When it comes to a like looking over a photo finish, you weren't even close. Just go on. Uh, but yeah, Hill's first Talladega win, which was honestly a surprising stat to hear, which I thought he had already won everything drafting track wise.
Yeah, he won Atlanta so many times, and he's won Daytona a few times. I thought
Yeah,
he had won at Talladega as well.
you would have thought. But yeah, he finally gets his first Talladega win. Pretty pumped about that. But ultimately, like, yeah, the Xfinity race, not too much going on. It does end under caution, which they had the stat going. I think it was a green white checkered stat. There was a good streak for the Xfinity races to not end under that. But I don't think this ends it. But yeah, ultimately, I thought it was an interesting race. I know it's probably boring to some, but I don't know. The Xfinity race, I couldn't tell you what needs to be fixed. I just think they did a good job at staying clean,
Yeah,
honestly.
I think this was a perfect example of everybody raced well. Everybody, was smart, and it just who knows if the 88 hadn't spun coming to the checkered, what if they would have spun in the trial when it was a massive pileup? You just never know.
Yeah.
So
Some notable finishers though. Matt Benedetto gets a top five, which was
nice.
they were in the mix quite a bit. Anthony Alfredo is sixth, Blaine Perkins, seventh. So yeah, fifth through seventh, honestly, like great finishes for all those teams. And then Daniel died 10th, which was honestly, again, great finish for that team as well. I picked Creed to win.
Mm.
I realized I went into this weekend picking like underdogs, people wanting them to get their first win, or people wanting them to get a win to kind of help there's Lucy. But yeah, I picked people who kind of had an underdog factor, like Sheldon Creed and Brad Keselowski, or were my picks for the weekend. Um, I don't know. I started to think I might have a curse on me, or it might be bad luck because Brad Keselowski just immediately wrecks. Um, and then I was like thinking back to Rockingham where I picked Ben Rhodes, and he just went out in the
He
first.
blew up like
Yeah.
10 in.
So I might need to watch who I pick now. Um,
Don't pick me then.
yeah. I'm gonna. I think that was the other thing where it's like I think I picked Lane like as like a backup pick on Rockingham, and I was like, hey, am I good or bad here? And then we'll see. I might choose him again just to test the waters. But yeah, so those are some notable finishers. Moving into the Cup race, Austin Cindric wins uh, through.
I definitely thought they were going to be wrecking coming to the checkered
Gosh,
somehow or
yeah.
another. I was like, someone's about to pull out a line. They're going to start trying to create a run, something. And they all just stayed like, you know, one by one lined up. And I was like, there, no one's going to even try. Like,
Yeah, well,
whoa.
we'll definitely get into that, especially later on, because that's gonna be a conversation point for this race. But yeah, so with the Cup race though, my scheme shout out was Dino Suarez. I thought the Wendy's was pretty cool. For a minute, it was Chase's, and then I watched the race. I was like, oh yeah, that scheme was really cool. I remember seeing it, and I just forgot that it was for Talladega. Uh, yeah, it just stood out, and I was like, I kind of miss these really busy
Is it the
looking
blue
scene.
one? The
No,
one that like
it was the
Elio
no,
ran
it
in
wasn't that
Daytona?
one. It was very I don't even know how to describe it. Just look it up after this, I guess. It
I
looked
will.
really good. It was frosty. Uh Zane Smith gets the pole. I think that's his first pole, but I was yeah, quite impressed. I wasn't able to watch qualifying, but it was quite a busy Ford and Toyota front or top 10, which is kind of to be expected right now, but as I said before, I had picked Keselowski, but going in on green flag pit stops, he spins with the eight. I can't quite remember how they spun, but they just spin and then ultimately like clip the 12, knocking out his toe link, uh, and taking the 12 and the six out. I think the eight was able to keep going, but that was lap 45-ish in stage one. And then this is actually where I jumped in because I was on my lunch break at work. I jumped in, started watching the race as they were coming back from this caution. And so, with like five to go or 10 to go in stage one, the 17 and 20 both wreck just on an odd, kind of weird, like they weren't even fully up to speed. Denny Hamlin bumps the 20 and he like spins into the 17 and they both go flying into the inside wall, which again, talk about a zillage hit that hurts. The 20 was the exact same in that way, where you just watching it live and oh, like
Yeah, it looks like it was painful.
yeah, I felt like I couldn't breathe after watching that. And then yeah, just an odd wreck in the way that they weren't up to speed. But Kyle Larson will ultimately go on to win stage one, which was kind of a surprise because kind of like what we're talking about at the end, like the top, like Larson and Byron all went to the top, and they like made it work. Um, and so seeing that, I was like, oh, like there's some options here. It may work out to where we might have three lanes going to the finish. Um, Spoiler alert, that didn't happen. Uh, Going into stage two, Anthony Alfredo actually led quite a bit. Um, so that was quite impressive on his part. He was up there and in the mix. It wasn't just fluky. It was just he was there and he was leading. And he's always been good at these drafting tracks. He gets hired quite a bit by the 62 or Beard Motorsports. But yeah. Also to note, that was Larson's first at least Talladega stage win, which is not surprising. It was surprising to see him like
Yeah,
finish the race again. Uh,
that's like the
yeah,
one thing he's not like amazing at is super
yeah.
speedway racing.
Well, his track record I feel like his results are getting a little bit better at these tracks because yeah, they weren't great, and now I feel like he's had some good finishes that give that confidence, that give that perspective on how to at least finish it. And yeah, I'm hoping that he keeps going with it. I mean, it would just be kind of cool to see him break through at one of these tracks, and then he can just check off he's won at every type of track, at least. Yeah, in stage two, we also saw some four wide racing, and this was a topic that was interesting because I was watching a YouTuber talk about kind of this era that we see because back, I don't know how long ago, but they would ride single file, and
Hmm.
they were just talking about knocking off laps. That's in itself kind of boring to look at. And then we have in this next gen car the fuel saving aspect, which is boring, but they do it four wide, visually a
Hmm.
lot more interesting. And I kind of want to get your opinion on not the difference, but like to me as a viewer, four wide racing trying to save fuel is much more interesting to me than single file. Let's knock off some laps because that single file they're still kind of going all out speed wise, but then in the fuel saving they're obviously slowing down. I to me, I would prefer the more visually interesting one because if you do go for a wide, there's also a chance for some chaos in there, which I do and don't want. Uh, but the chaotic personality in me wants to see the four wide crash. I think that would just be if I was to go to a video game, I would totally wreck in the middle of that just to watch some carnage. But yeah, I don't know. It was an interesting fact where it was just saying like this four wide saving fuel is the modern day single file. Let's knock off some laps. And that was something people had an issue with back then. What's your opinion on it?
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I'd probably rather see four wide fuel saving, but I don't know if you really can even come up with a solution other than maybe making the race like shorter or changing the stage breaks to where maybe they don't have to go into fuel saving mode.
Yeah.
So that's the only few things I've thought of that they could adjust somehow so that that way it doesn't turn into a fuel mileage race or people like running, 80% throttle or something just to save fuel.
Yeah. And we saw like we had mentioned earlier, but Denny Hamlin fell back to save fuel. And I know he kind of does that at times at these places, especially with this fuel saving strategy that comes into play now. He will fall back and kind of sandbag, but then work his way back up. He likes to do that. And he also likes to, he just kind of likes to do everything at a drafting track. I know he is not a fan. I have yet to watch his or listen to his podcast, but I know he was not a fan of this weekend. And it was Jeff Gordon. Was he a sandbag kind of like drafting guy, or was he always up front?
I feel like for the most part, I always saw him kind of at the front.
Yeah. It's an interesting strategy for sure, but oh yeah, I wanted to talk about pit road, head on a swivel. A guy from the pit crew on the seven, I think one of the tire carriers on the seven got hit by the 21s. You see that?
So that's my buddy Jarius. He was going out to the right side of the car, and the 21 came in and clipped the right rear tire, and it sent him
Yeah.
onto the hood. So
Well,
I think
especially
he's
getting hit.
okay.
It
He
was kind of like
posted some
getting hit with
stuff
like
on
a
it.
medicine ball because just the way the energy being all rubber. And
Yep.
but I was like, ow. Like have you ever been clipped by a car on pit road?
No, at Rockingham we were close. My tire carrier did get clipped. Kind of the same thing that happened to Jarius. He got clipped. It kind of moved him into me, but that's the only time I've actually even remotely been close to getting hit. And it wasn't even getting hit by a car. I would have been hit by my teammate that got hit by a car.
Hmm.
So it'd been like a domino effect.
Yeah. What is the worst like injury you've had on pit road?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm trying to think. I don't know if I've really had an injury on pit road. I mean, I burnt my finger or something like that. Kind of more so normal things because you're dealing with hot components and parts.
Yeah.
No, I don't think I've had any crazy injuries. I've seen some other people get injured for sure. That some of them can be pretty gnarly to witness or watch or
Yeah.
be around.
I was watching a clip from way back in the day, like when there wasn't a, pit road speed.
Hmm.
Because like it's really cool and impressive to watch, but it's one of those things where if the 21 was going full speed, that tire carrier
Dude,
would not
those
be.
those outlaw days back then, like when I
Yeah.
watch it, I'm like,
The
oh,
pit
I'm
stops were
blowing
not what they
away.
were today,
Well,
but
no, but just watching and thinking that that was like at one point that was the thing where they were like people can jump out on pit road and then there's Dale Earnhardt and
yeah,
whoever, Ricky Rudd, they're going like 80 miles an hour, like legitimately just flooring it, trying to like get as much speed as they can to get on the track.
yeah,
And it goes to just, I guess for me, I see like the evolution of like where safeties come from, and I've seen, how far the sport's come, and then when they realize like we can't be doing this, we gotta
yeah.
do something different, we gotta make this safer. So, because a guy actually was killed on pit road back in like 1989, 90. It
Mm,
wasn't. It wasn't as long ago as you'd think, but it was because they had no pit road and Billy got spun because someone was leaving this pit, saw he was entering, got turned around, and he ended up clipping the right rear of someone else's car, and the rear changer was the one that got pinched between the two cars, and it killed him. So
Wow.
I mean, it's a crazy place, but after that incident, they said we're gonna have to implement a pit road. Like there's no reason for us not to. So
Yeah.
fun fact, even though it's really morbid.
So end of stage two, Bubba Wallace wins, and then Lucy go. She's wanting to go out. We will after this. I gotta finish talking about racing. She doesn't care. All right, yeah. So end of stage two, Bubba Wallace wins, and then going into stage three, though, again, this is where we kind of get to the hard to pass. It wasn't, I thought, I mean, we all think in stage three that it's going to be the most interesting part. But again, we just kind of just skipping to the end. We just kind of keep it clean, clean racing most of the time. And yeah, I mean, there was a bit of controversy actually at the end of stage two that we should mention. Joey Logano was pretty upset with Austin Cindric that he didn't push him. I think he was upset that he pushed the 23 the way he did. But then I think Joey was trying to hook up with or link up with Cindric to get pushed to the end to hopefully win the stage. And he was pretty mad at Cindric on the radio, called him a lot of
I heard about
names.
that.
Yeah,
Colorful names.
very colorful names. But I don't agree with his comments because Cindric he did eventually comment on it in the media center and just saying like I was just trying to avoid a wreck. And when I went back, I actually just recently watched the highlights, um, kind of refresh myself. But yeah, like Joey threw kind of a it wasn't even a block because he wasn't trying to block. He was just trying to link up, but it was pretty risky.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, I think if Cindric didn't check up, I don't know if it would result in a crash, but it was definitely a high risk chance that it would have. And he said that's what he was doing, and Logano didn't like that. I'm curious to see how that plays out this week and see if Logano comments on it. But yeah, a lot of people are upset with Logano because they're like he is this a-hole in the he's very two-faced. A lot of people don't like that about him. Um, but yeah, I get more Cindric's side than I do Logano's side. I think if Logano goes back and looked at it, then he might have a different opinion. So, but again, we'll see. Another controversial like move done in stage three was Ross Chastain. Did you see this move?
We're just trying to like get the pack to pick him up basically and like slow down.
But particularly, it was like all the Toyotas had linked up, and their strategy was everyone link up, let's go. And he was falling like a rock and tried to jump in front of Denny. And yeah, it kind of ruined the Toyota's day. Like that was kind of a story that Denny Hamlin finished like mid pack or so just because of that move. Like it just killed everything.
Mm.
And it was very, yeah, I again didn't watch it live, but then going back to watch it, I was like, wow, that was risky. I get not trying to lose that position, but like, wow.
You're gonna get run over, bud.
Yeah, but that kind of leads to this conversation of again, I was saying this before we started recording was this Talladega race, I enjoyed the respectful strategy of it all, but what I didn't like, and I think this is a core problem that they're having at these tracks, these drafting tracks, is the gridlock can't pass. If you get out of line, you're falling like a rock. And I think at the end, Larson was commenting, he's like, I had nowhere to go. But also, if I did, he had Logano behind him just wasn't in the right situation with teammates or common manufacturers. Um, and but even Byron was probably in the same bubble of like, okay, if I get out of line, like it's just not.
He had
It,
Alex Bowman behind him, but aside from Alex getting in line with him, I don't know who else because I was trying to look at that too and see what lines would form on that last lap, and I think everybody was kind of in the same spot that they weren't sure what to do and they didn't have who they wanted to behind them or
yeah,
close enough to where they said, okay, I can make this move, and that's why everybody stayed like one by one. So
yeah,
definitely was not a typical Talladega finish like I was expecting. Like that last lap, I'm like, all right, backstretch, someone's gonna start breaking out of line and they're gonna start to try to form something, and nobody did.
yeah. Well, it's interesting because we're talking about not the typical Talladega finish, but we also did have a photo finish. It wasn't anything that needed to be analyzed for a while, but it was still like a photo finish. I think it was like 3/10 of a second. I'm not sure. Um, yeah, I don't know. Like I didn't come out of it hating it, but I was like, there's obviously a glaring issue here with the car.
Hmm.
Um, and it needs to be addressed. But I still couldn't personally qualify the racing as bad.
Yeah, I don't
Bubba
think it was a
Wallace
bad
went,
product.
I can't remember how many laps it took Bubba Wallace, but it was pretty quick. He went from 20th to 10th. Um, and at the end of stage two, Larson went from eighth to third just based off of the Logano Cindric situation. But I did see an interview, I think it was Larson who was saying you kind of need it because he got a penalty and had to go all the way to the back at the beginning of stage two. And I was watching that part, and yeah, it did seem kind of hard to make your way back up unless something did happen. And I think through just pit strategy, he was able to work his way back up. And so I think that's the glaring issue is how hard it is to pass, particularly at these places, because just the drag on the car is so intense outside of the actual drafting. It was hard for me to say like an absolute talking an absolute of like you couldn't pass at all because end of stage one we saw the Hendrick cars and the Chevys get up there and make it work. Um,
Yeah.
but I don't know if that's a good road to go down because you're increasing the manufacturer uh, play a lot. I'm not a huge fan of manufacturers manipulating races to that extent, you know? Um,
I could get behind that. Kind of want the
yeah,
drivers and teams
the
just to figure it out.
yeah, absolutely. I want them to go back to the proximity chat or whatever it was, the global chat. I want that to happen again so bad.
Yeah, the teammate chat or
But this
whatever it
also,
was.
yeah, I would love to have heard. Again, I just to me that's such an interesting dynamic to put it in to.
I didn't even know that was a thing until a couple of months ago when I
Yeah,
saw
me
a video about
neither.
it.
Yeah. And
So
then I was like, let's do that experiment again. Put 40 drivers all like especially at the end of stage two, probably just all tired and angry. And let's hear some drama.
put
Uh,
Joey in Austin's ear.
yeah. Absolutely. Um, yeah, so I'm not like the manufacturers. I get the most on drafting tracks, but I don't want to pave that road much more. So I do want to see some changes, but ultimately, like this kind of led me to think like what's been the best era of these restrictor plate, super speedway drafting tracks, and so on. Like, in your opinion, because if we go back to when they were doing the single file clocking laps, but those cars were going all out, and yeah. Do you have a
Hmm.
favorite era?
I might would have to go back to like the 90s or early 2000s. And even then I wasn't really much of a fan back then because I was so young, but I feel like watching some of the footage from back then to what we have now, the cars were so much more dependent on having cars around them to push and or sometimes like if your car was really good, you could do it on your own. So,
Yeah.
like for example, I remember Jeff Gordon in 2005 had the Yoda car, but he had such a strong car, like he pulled out a line in second and went around the guy leading the race like on his own. Like he didn't
Yeah.
need help. So it kind of gave it back to the team and the driver. Like, hey, like we have a great driver and we've got a great car. Like, you know, I kind of miss that era of racing. I don't miss I don't like the part where it's almost like the gridlock. Like everybody's supposed to be given the same stuff and it's just too monotonous in my
Yeah.
opinion that it's too much of the same stuff and it's really hard just to be able to manipulate, you can manipulate strategy, but manipulate, what you can do with the car. So I
Yeah.
think I miss that era if I was to pick one. But I mean, all that being said, I think there's a few things that NASCAR can do or the teams can do that, all it takes is a little bit of communication and teamwork, and they'd figure out something, and then you're right back to where you were.
Yeah.
With good racing, maybe it's up in the horsepower, maybe it's changing something aero wise that takes away downforce or something from these cars that it adds the value to whoever is in second, third place that wants to pull out a line instead of it being whoever has the lead on the last lap or who's in second place on the outside of the leader. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I was seeing some highlights of the week going into the Talladega weekend. And seeing like the tandem drafting from years ago. It's
I
interesting. I don't,
never was a fan of the tandem drafting. I don't know why. Like some people really liked it. I was
yeah.
never a fan of it. I just thought it looked goofy.
I think I'm in the middle on it. Like I just didn't see enough. I was too young to really remember a lot of it at the time.
No,
Um,
I the little bit I saw, I thought it was so odd. And maybe it's because I was conditioned to seeing pack racing. That maybe if it was the opposite, if I'd grown up with just
all right,
people,
Lucy
just
just
the
plopped
tandem
down.
drafting. Maybe if it was just the tandem drafting I grew up watching and then watching pack racing, maybe that'd have been so strange to me. But no, the little bit that they had the tandem drafting, I was like, this is goofy. I do not like this.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a bit goofy to watch, and that's actually I think when they had that global chat or whatever. Yeah, it was like watching it, I mean, comparing it to today's kind of racing at these drafting tracks. I was like, oh, I might have liked that a bit better because they were able to just with two cars make a difference.
Yeah,
So like that aspect was cool because then it would have maybe allowed Byron and Bowman to just link up and go.
yeah, for sure.
Part of me was wondering if on the last lap, if I was Larson or Byron, to maybe even both, just instinct push the two cars out really far and then just move and let them fall back. But you'd have to time it right in the tri-oval. But I was also like, that's extremely like, I mean, you talk about dangerous on the last lap. It's kind of out the window. But
I thought for sure coming off four, coming to the trioval, like the 24 and 48 were going to pull out together and try to
yeah,
like let the 60, they were pushing the 60.
yeah.
I thought they were going to let the 60 fall and they were going to pass them. But I think that if they did that, they were basically going to guarantee themselves uh, third, fourth place finishes no matter what. So I think they
I
had to
think
stay in
the
line.
bottom line, if they were to have made any progress, the bottom line would have
Yeah,
been in some sort of.
yeah,
But that's what
for
I was
sure.
just wondering. It's like because there is a, if I remember right, a brief moment where if you pulled out a line and the car in front of you is coming back, like let's say if Larson had put Cindric out and then left him out to dry, and while Cindric's falling, if he could have timed it to pass him right at the right moment. But I was like, I just think the drag once you get out of
I
the
mean,
line is
in real time, it's so hard to try to figure out
oh,
what to do.
absolutely. But I'm just wondering, like, if this gridlock strategy, or not strategy, but situation keeps happening, like, what is the desperation going to start to look like? Is it going to look like throwing somebody out there, uh, letting them fall back and then you somehow get in front of them? But again, just the speed just becomes so different outside of the draft. But I think that was just me trying to think of, like, what's the solution in this scenario? But to me, I think you're going to we talk about desperation, especially in these moments, and like you get a driver who's not terribly experienced up at the front, terribly experienced in the lead, terribly experienced racing for wins, or maybe doesn't even have a lot of wins. Um, like Byron and Larson are, especially Byron, are pretty patient people when it comes to okay, like I just know if I go for the win, it's the cost here is huge. But you get some other drivers up there, they may have tried something, and it could lead to a bad wreck by just letting the car in front of them out to dry, and it forces the line behind them to wreck. Um, so I'm curious to see if that progresses any sort of way. Let's talk about some notable finishers. As I did say, Austin Cindric won. Let's talk about some notable finishers. Carson Hocevar gets sixth. Noah Gragson gets fourth. This is a notable finish just because he's not very consistent at these tracks, but Larson getting second. This is obviously after the disqualification of Logano and Priest. Priest would have been a notable finisher, but now he's dead last.
38th.
Yeah. And Suarez, as you should look up his paint scheme, was pretty cool. He gets ninth and Austin Hill gets 10th. So those were some pretty interesting top tens for the weekend from Xfinity and Cup race. Getting into some questions I have, or I might want to run by you, is tires at drafting tracks don't matter as much. But why is that? Do you notice or know any reason?
So the tire degradation at like Daytona and Talladega is kind of an afterthought just because the banking, there's severe banking at both tracks, but it's such a gradual change in surface, like which angle, if you're on the back stretch, front stretch, tri-oval, or in a corner, you're not the G forces and stuff that these cars are pushing. It's not as severe. Like when you're racing on a track like Darlington that's got grittier asphalt and you're sliding tires, you're eating tires up. The Daytona and Talladega, you're not sliding tires like you are at other tracks like that. It's just the way that the G forces and stuff and um the way that these cars drive on those tracks, it just they don't wear out like they typically do on other tracks. Old Atlanta, before they repaved it, made it a super speedway. That was a track that ate up tires as well, just because of the angle of the corners that you're trying to push and how hard you're pushing in those corners. That's where the tire wear was such a big factor. That these bigger tracks like Daytona and Talladega, you're not putting as much there's not as much side force on these cars going through the corners that they are at like at Darlington or something.
Yeah. That's what I figured, but it's interesting because like somebody
Yeah, it's
pointed.
science, dude. That's why like when I was younger, I didn't realize it either until I got older. I was like, oh, they don't wear like they do.
Yeah, it's very interesting because it's just you'd think they would just wear kind of the same, but yeah, I guess they don't. Talk to me about the different types of air guns that y'all have. I know that they switched from like just air to nitrous. I don't know if it's just full of nitrous or not, but I didn't know there's different types of guns.
Yeah, so we run a nitrogen bottle, nitrogen based air, but I guess back in the
You
day it
ever
was
like
originally the
you ever take some kind of like
take some with
helium?
me. So actually, some teams did try helium for a while, and that's actually the best gas to run is helium. It's the thinnest.
I just imagine the radios. Hey man, come
They
on
those guns squeal when they use helium.
in.
It was
They
very
also
noticeable at
float.
the track. It was very noticeable at the racetrack from what the guys talked about that when they ran helium in their guns, the squeal that the gun made was insane.
I just
So
like a very serious crew chief. Like, let's just say, like Joey Logano's like, all right, how much gas, how many laps for fuel? We have 10 more. Say that again. 10
yes,
more?
just a super high pitched voice.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
And he just hears over there, what are you doing up there, Wolf? This is the
yeah,
good stuff.
we had the IR guns, which is Ingersoll Rand. That's what like the original pit gun was. That was a company that made air guns. And then over time, teams started to realize that they could make up spots on pit road and be faster on the racetrack, and it would ultimately help and be beneficial if they could be faster on pit road. So they started designing their own guns. I think in the mid 2000s. Sometime they started saying like, "Hey, we're gonna work on making our own guns, so maybe we can hit lug nuts a little bit faster and faster pit stops, gaining track position." And so the IR gun was kind of like the housing of the gun, but maybe the internal parts were getting redone and redesigned. And then over time, it became where they created their own gun completely, built it, CNC machined it. And so for a while, we had something called a clutch gun, which was like the best gun ever created on pit road. I say this in the best way I can. I'm not trying to like belittle anybody, but anybody that was an
Amen.
average tire changer, they were not. If you were an average tire changer, if you got a hold of a clutch gun, you could be really good, and it upped everybody's game. So the best tire changers on pit road with the standard gun before a clutch gun became an amazing tire changer. Like I mean, you were even faster. So there was a about 7 years or so, 8 years, we had clutch guns or a hybrid version of a clutch gun, if not a full clutch gun. And then in 2018, we went from 6 men over the wall to having 5 guys over the wall, and they also implemented us to use a third-party company called Paoli, who is an Italian company. They build IndyCar guns and stuff for one lug, and then they started building our 5 lug guns. And NASCAR had us rent our own guns from Paoli to help with the cost of how much these guns and stuff were costing these teams to rebuild, make, keep up with. So that happened in 2018, and then in 2022 we went to the one lug wheel for the Cup Series. So Xfinity still runs Paoli guns, and then the Cup Series has their one lug Paoli gun as well. So things kind of split off in 2022 with the one lug wheel coming into play. But there are still clutch guns and hammer guns in the industry, but they're not very prominent now because we have to use Paoli for Xfinity, so a lot of teams elect to use a Paoli gun for the truck races. And some teams decide to use they want to still use clutch guns or hammer guns for truck races for 5 lug pit stops. But I think most of the teams across the board try to keep it similar to what you're going to use for Xfinity Day for 5 lug pit stops, being that you'll use a Paoli gun for truck pit stops, and then you'll have your Xfinity pit stops be the exact same gun, which is still the Paoli.
Yeah. Sounds that's cool. Yeah, I just didn't know that. Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
There's so much science behind it that you could get. We could probably talk hour and a half of the science behind pit stops, man. It's so in detail.
Yeah. I did see like kind of subtly notice a progression of particularly the jacks that the jackmans use. Like I remember seeing one like back in the day. Obviously didn't have like the grip that they have on the side now for it and everything. So it's just interesting to see all that. I don't know if the gas man can progress the
A
can in
whole
any
lot.
way.
They
Yeah.
made the can smaller this year,
Oh, really?
or the last year, I believe. Last year or this year, they made the Cup cars cans are a little bit smaller because of how much fuel they need to be able to try to get in the car,
Yeah.
and they made the fuel cell smaller, I
I
believe, as
wonder if they're
well.
ever gonna move the because I know like F1 or Indy particularly like it doesn't it load in from the top or maybe it
I
used
think it
to.
used to.
Yeah, because
F1 now
F1
runs a
doesn't.
hybrid engine.
Yeah. Um,
They don't fuel the car anymore. It's too
but yeah,
dangerous.
I've always wondered if NASCAR will ever change that for the sheer fact of just competition and maybe just because it's kind of slower than the actual, especially in the Cup Series with the one lug now. It's the fuel takes the longest. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I wonder if it will ever change. But I also am like, whatever. Well, if it changes, it changes. So that wraps up the Talladega talk. Coming up, we have Texas. Is it
Good old
all?
Texas.
Is it all three series?
All
Which,
three.
if you were to ask me, I think Texas is going to get the Atlanta treatment. That or Kentucky are my two rumored picks. Because have you heard about that rumor?
No.
Apparently, well, they said it wasn't a NASCAR-owned track, so then it just leads people to think like uh, SMI tracks, but it's going to get the Atlanta treatment. And
Get one
so,
race a year.
no, get like drafting track treatment.
Oh, they're gonna just overhaul it, make it a super
Yeah.
speedway.
And
Hmm.
from how much complain people complain about Texas, I'm like, and also it's so, it looks a lot like Atlanta in
And
races.
Charlotte,
Well, Charlotte's tighter though, right? The turns are a bit tighter.
it's more narrow.
Yeah. And I remember Atlanta and Texas particularly had a lot wider turns, or at least longer ones, I think. Um, So I'm interested to see if they do anything. To me, Texas, I know people have just been complaining about it for a while. And I was like, I wouldn't be surprised if SMI was just fed up and was like, you know what? It's going to Atlanta. But yeah, all three series are there. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Uh, so let's go through our picks. I should pick Lane Riggs. Talk about my
With the
bad
rate
luck.
you've been, with the rate you've been picking things, we don't need bad luck. But yeah, I'm going 34 and 51 for the weekend. Got to pull for
Okay.
my own guys.
I'm gonna go with Daniel Hemrick for trucks. Did you just say your Xfinity? Obviously, your
Yeah,
Xfinity is probably the
I'm just
51.
I'm gonna pick the 51.
I'm gonna pick the 51. Now let's think about Xfinity here. I I don't know. I'm gonna have to go with Allgaier.
That's a solid pick.
Yeah, and then with Cup Series, okay, Lucy, she's
She's on one.
fancy. Yeah, seriously. Uh, you have a Cup pick. This is where you can be
Mm,
not biased.
not biased. I'll go Chase Elliott again. I think or again, as in he won this race last year, so I'll see
Yeah.
if he can go back to back at Texas.
He won, but it wasn't a dominant win. I think it was a pretty narrow win.
I
Or
can't remember. I know it was in the Hooters car. I remember that.
yeah. And then they had to sue Hooters later on. Uh I'm gonna go with gosh. Part of me wants to say William Byron, but I don't know. I'll go with William Byron. I'll go
There you
with
go.
yeah. I would need to
Solid
record who
picks.
I pick because I know I picked Keselowski last week or yeah, for Talladega, but I I do a favorite like Hendrick cars, but in just being realistic, like at these tracks and stuff. But he's a safe pick every week probably at this point. But
He's been good.
yeah. So is Bowman. Honestly, Bowman could be a sneaky winner here.
Heck yeah.
So yeah. All right. Well, that will do it for this week, and we'll see you next week after Texas. But have fun traveling.
Yeah, that's it's not a bad
Do you
flight. It's like
fly now?
2.5 hours to Texas. It's not
Oh,
horrible.
okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, whenever I fly from California to Charlotte, if the only time I really do a layover anymore is if it's in Dallas because it's a
Halfway.
yeah, it's a layover that makes sense. It doesn't really add on any time. And it's a good airport in the way of like food options. But yeah, my wife and I were looking at flying to Charlotte soon, and I remember she was like, "Look at these layovers," and one of them was in Miami, and that's just such a frustrating layover. I've done it once, I think, and yeah, you go down like two
An hour and a
hours.
half and then
Yeah,
fly 5.5. Like
yeah,
makes
no,
it for
I made
such
that
a long
mistake
day.
once going. I was flying back home from Charlotte to here in LA, and I don't know what I was thinking, and it made me mad because I had a 5 hour layover in Philly. And
Oh my
I was like,
gosh.
oh, that's fine because like it was just I was tight for money at the time, still am, but like I was like, it's a cheap flight, it's not horrible, but it was in my head I went, it's okay, it's 2 hours there. That means it'll be like 2.5 hours, 3 hour flight left. Nope, it added on instead of 4 hours, it became a 5 hour flight. I didn't realize this, and I also chose the aisle seat thinking I won't be there long. Um,
Man, you
and
learn from your
I
mistakes.
also wasn't actively charging my phone. Uh, and so,
Oh,
yeah, it was one of my worst flight experiences, but it was really just because I was mad at myself for not, it just never crossed my mind until mid-flight on the way back. And I was like, oh no, wait a second. Then I did the math and yeah. So yeah, I told after that experience, I always made my layovers like halfway if I have to do them. Because there's
Kansas, Texas, Oklahoma,
yeah,
somewhere.
Denver's a big one. Denver and Dallas are the big ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had to do, especially when I fly Delta, a layover in Atlanta when I'm going to Charlotte is just so pointless, so
Yeah, I
pointless.
agree.
I just makes we had to do a layover in Raleigh going to Charlotte, going back for Thanksgiving last year. That was the
My gosh.
it's like nice because it's like okay, well the layover, and then once you're on the last flight, you're like at least it's short enough. But it's just like why we literally
Why is
probably
this a thing?
we probably flew over Charlotte to get here.
Fly over
So
Charlotte or like the time it takes you to land, reboard, and all that stuff. You could like basically get in a rental car and get here at the same time.
yeah, honestly, I kind of prefer driving at this point. But anyways, yep, that'll do it for this week. We'll see y'all next week. Yeah, hopefully Texas is good to y'all.
Heck yeah, I hope so too, man. Come on with a cowboy hat
There you go, and guns.
and the revolvers.
Yeah, take a gun and run. I actually told my friends that I sent them a couple pictures of my friends who are big Marvel fans. I sent them pictures because they had like the actual hero costumes on the red carpet, and I sent it to them and they're like, "Oh, that's cool. Can you like get up close and touch them?" And I said, "I'll do you one better. I'll wear them." And I just kept making the joke. I was like, they go and look at Bucky's costume. It's like, what happened? Like you just see my uniform on him, my PA uniform. Like, what happened to him? And you just see me with a metal arm. I don't even know. I think he went over there. Well, all right. See y'all next week.
See you
Ten
guys.
away. 5, 4,